I'm the program specialist for technology and education in the communication and information sector of UNESCO at headquarters in Paris.
We've had the good fortune, basically, of meeting you and re-meeting you, Zeynep, over a number of years as one of the leaders at UNESCO who's leading the activities related to open education resources. And as this issue of the EdTech Connected is focused on open education resources, we thought it appropriate to have the opportunity to hear a little bit more about you and your work. All right, so first of all, how did you get into your current position? What were some of the professional or personal or academic paths that led you to where you are now?
Well, I started out as a teacher. I was teaching English and literacy in Canada, in Toronto. I have a Master's of Education degree from the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education, OISE. And my background was in minority groups in education. And it was way before open educational resources was even part of our vocabulary. But my training is really about how to get immigrant groups integrated and involved and thriving and succeeding in education systems, and also with a focus on language learning. I was recruited as a program specialist at UNESCO in 1998 on April Fool's Day. And it was part of the Young Professionals program of UNESCO. And I worked in always dealing with education, but not always directly in education. I worked in the Culture of Peace program for the International Year for Culture of Peace, and talking about what grassroots organizations are doing to promote peace at the beginning. Then I worked for 10 years in higher education in quality assurance and recognition, and also dealing with the use of technologies in education. And in 2011, I started my current post in the communication information sector, working on open educational resources, of course, and also the teacher training for the use of technologies in education. The work that I've been doing that brought me here was actually largely related to the work of the communication and information sector, which had a very large program on open solutions. So open educational resources, free and open source software, and of course, open access to scientific journals, OA. And I had been working in open educational resources with Commonwealth of Learning and with the higher education sector before, but it's really from the first World OER Congress that I was responsible officer for in the communication information sector that I started being very much involved in this area. And the first one, of course, led to the second one. And the second World OER Congress was, I think many of you, a lot of people were involved in it. We were using technology much more, and we were having a lot of consultations, and we came up with the Libyan Oer Declaration, which is the basis of the current UNESCO OER recommendation. I was responsible for ensuring that the OER recommendation came to be from UNESCO's side in terms of supporting its development and going through the processes that are necessary for an instrument to come to life. Of course, bringing it to the member states for their consultation and ensuring that all the processes are put into place accurately, etc.
Tell us a little bit more about, it sounds like you deal with lots of organizations in the OER space. Could you provide sort of a description of some of the general groupings of the type of organizations with whom you've interacted?
Well, first of all, of course, there's the educational community. And within the educational community, we work with governments. There are key stakeholders at UNESCO. And then institutions. And within the institutions, we work at the decision-making level, of course, and at the capacity building level and policy level. But we also work with in terms of institutions and governments, we have worked with quality assurance bodies to some degree, not much in this area, of course, but they are part of our stakeholders. Then we have researchers and research institutions, which are really quite important for the progress in this area. Then we work with civil society organizations, and this includes institutions that deal with education, institutions that also deal with persons with disabilities, because inclusive education is a key component of this document of the OER recommendation and of our work. We work with teacher training institutions. We also work with cultural institutions, and in particular libraries. And I think libraries are really important partners that really have to be called out for the really important work that they do in this area. Then we have been in touch with student associations, of course, teachers unions to some degree have been part of our discussions. I mean, we work with ESIP and SU in this area, and publishers. We have been working with the International Publishers Association, and that's a really exciting collaboration too, because it's important that everybody is at the table and that we're working together. We have worked with the private sector, for example, Microsoft or other such partners, and with, of course, we have been starting to work more with the ministries responsible for digital innovation and for youth employment. And of course, other intergovernmental associations such as the Commonwealth of Learning, UNDP, UN Women, for example. And we have worked with, of course, funding bodies who are essential to us actually moving forward in this area. And it's thanks to the Hewlett Foundation that we have been able to work so extensively in this area, and that the agenda has been really advanced in such a substantial manner.
Well, again, the important global role that UNESCO is playing in convening stakeholder conversations together about this topic. Great credit to the work that you've done over the years in terms of building that community as well. I want to pivot for a moment to get a little bit more granular about talking first about some impediments, one or two that you see too in terms of OER adoption, but then we'll turn to successes. So let's start with maybe just briefly pick one or two, because of course we could provide links to the OER recommendations and a wealth of resources, and then other people who have been interviewed as part of this EdTech Connected issue and other resource links. But what, if you were to pick one or two impediments that you see that you want to call out for people that might be unfamiliar with OERs, what would those be?
I think the first one is really the first point of the recommendation is capacity and understanding of what open educational resources are and aren't. So this has become really much more serious with the COVID-19 pandemic, because there are a lot more digital resources out there, and everything that's free is not an OER. An open educational resource is a resource which is available on an open license or in the public domain and allows for legal sharing, reuse, repurposing, adaptation, redistribution, etc. It's not just anything that's online. So it's really important that there's a clear understanding of what OER is and isn't. And at the same time of being able to find it and use it and interact with it. It requires a lot of work actually, and it requires some capacity building and some concentrated efforts at very different levels. And I think that's a challenge. And it's not a challenge that's unsurmountable, but it's definitely something that needs to be addressed. It doesn't happen automatically or magically. There has to be discussion and there has to be resources made available to stakeholders in order to be able to have this information more effectively. The second area I would say is the sustainability, because open educational resources need another business model, and that has to be found and recognized, and it won't be the same model for every institution in every instance, but it's something that needs to be seriously discussed and to find a way for it to work easily for both the institutions and for those that are developing the materials.
Can you think of one or two success stories?
One very simple one. In November 2019, 193 member states voted by consensus that there should be a UNESCO legal instrument on supporting the use of open educational resources in their countries. I think that is incredibly powerful. It means that there's a recognition at the international level.
In terms of OER adoption at a national level, you've talked about places like New Zealand or Canada or other places. What about in lower resource developing country context, and particularly in light of COVID-19? Any specific countries or case study examples that you want to call out in terms of a model that could continue post-COVID-19?
Sure. In terms of actions at the national level, my colleagues at UNESCO Dakar have been working very closely with the countries in their sub-region, which is Senegal, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali. And they have been working with the development of a policy. There was some policy work that was done in Burkina Faso, which was very exciting. And that we are just about to launch a policy forum for ministers to get involved with promoting OER within their national structures at the digital innovation level, youth employment, and education. And the idea would be to follow it up with capacity building courses to address exactly the challenge of how to actually use OER and find OER and share OER, and also to talking about different examples of how to make effective policy to support the use of this OER. And it's something which is about to happen, so it's very actual.
Well, Zeynep, I want to thank you for taking the time to share your experiences with our EdTech Connected audience. Again, we'll put a volume of links to resources that you've referenced as well. And want to wish you a great day and look forward to working with you on our combined interest in open education resources. So have a great day.
Thank you very much, Tony, and looking forward to our continued collaboration. Thanks a lot.